Welcome to Starcanum, where we are obsessed with Star Wars Unlimited. I'm Ryan, and I'm so glad you're here because today we're taking a look at Nute Gunray. Oh boy. First of all, sorry if I sound a little more throaty than usual. I'm getting over a lung infection. I've been coughing a lot, and things are a little stressed. But that's okay. I wanted to take a minute and talk about this deck, which I played this week at my local store. Now, why Nute Gunray, I hear you asking? Well, you might not know this, but I have a second YouTube channel called Magic Arcanum, where I talk about Magic the Gathering, a game that I've been playing for, 20, 25 years. And the creators of Star Wars Unlimited know about that channel, and they gave me 2 preview cards for Twilight of the Republic to kind of spread awareness about the game to Magic players. So those 2 cards that I got to preview were Rune Haako and Multi-Troop Transport, and I kind of made a personal challenge for myself to play a deck with both of those cards in it before the next set, Jump to Lightspeed, comes out. Now, I don't have a ton of experience playing Villainous or Darkside. I almost always play heroic decks, so I didn't really know where to even begin with this, so I kind of poked around online and looked at some other lists for inspiration, and I found one by a user named 2 Years that looked pretty good. So I copied that and made a few changes based on what was in my collection or what I thought might work a little better for my local scene, and that's what I've got here today. So the whole thing about Nute, right, is that he can make a Battle Droid for you. If 2 or more of your own friendly units were defeated this phase, as an action, you can exhaust him, and he'll just crank out a free 1/1 Trooper Droid, which can be useful if enough other cards in your deck have a way to capitalize on that, right? And the best way to do it, by design, is use the exploit mechanic, which lets you self-defeat or sacrifice your own units to reduce the cost of something that you're trying to play. So not only will exploiting your own stuff make sure things keep dying so that Nute can make more tokens, you're also able to use his own tokens to fuel bigger stuff. And you just kind of, in theory, create this nice stepladder where you're cranking out little droids and cheap disposable bodies that fuel the unleashing of your capital ships in this case. That's why it's called capital exploits, because we are trying to rush out some really heavy hitters, excuse me, and use those to defeat our opponent before they're able to establish their own strategy or, take control of the game their own way. So let's go through the list real quick. I'll talk about what worked and what didn't work. And spoiler for anyone who's wondering, I went 0-3 with this deck. I lost every game. Some of them were very close. Some of them, if I had maybe changed a card or 2, I could have done better. And some of them, it just came down to being more familiar with the lines and the sequencing and knowing when to save my droids for a different exploit target or when to redeem stuff. So we'll talk about that as it comes up. Right off the top, we've got 2 copies of Rune Haako, my preview card, and, again, he had to be in here. He's just a nice, solid 2-cost unit with 3 power, so he trades with, just about any other 2-cost unit in the game. But he also has a when played that can give something -1/-1 if you've already lost a unit of your own this turn. So that gives him a little bit more utility later in the game as I'm exploiting my own stuff or trading off units. Rune can come in and mop up a wounded opponent's unit or just weaken it enough that I can attack into it and get a favorable trade. I like the flexibility there. I think he's a pretty good card. Maybe not perfect for this deck or strategy, but I was usually happy to see him either in my opening draw or even later in the game. Other 2-cost units include the Wartime Trade Official, so this is just a nice cheap body that we can use as exploit fodder, and when he is defeated, he leaves behind another Battle Droid, so we can do it again. So that's the kind of thing that this deck needs, right? Recurring ways to get multiple cheap bodies that can fuel our bigger stuff. Same idea driving the Confederate Courier. That's a 2/1 space unit that, when it's defeated, leaves behind a Battle Droid. And these all work great with Poggle the Lesser, who is a 2-cost unit. He's a 1/4. But whenever you play another unit, you can exhaust Poggle, and he will make a Battle Droid. So he can just kind of endlessly crank these things out, which is super handy. Then technically this is an event, but you almost always play it as a unit, and that is droid deployment, because it just makes 2 droids. And that is a really great opening play because it sets you up with plenty of exploit pieces for something bigger going into your second and third turns. Battle Droid Escort comes next, so this again makes 2 bodies right away, and when it's defeated it leaves behind another one, so again just more fuel for the fire. And then I've got 1 copy of Morgan in here because I felt like having a little bit of restore and a chunkier 3/6 body might kind of help me hold the line and stay alive. And when she attacks, she can defeat another friendly unit to draw a card, so that's another good way to just make use of any spare battle droids I've got laying around. And it felt like she would be a worthy inclusion in this deck. Coming in next, we have a couple copies of Kraken, who makes 2 battle droids when he shows up, and then when he attacks, he can buff, your droids, so he's just kind of a good ground pounder and kind of serves as like a mid-range point, kind of tying your droid themes together with your bigger units at your top end. Droidica Security, I know this doesn't have a shield, which is like the weirdest thing, but it is a Sentinel. And you can get it out pretty quick thanks to the Exploit 2, right? So if you open with droid deployment, you got 2 cheap bodies. Then you go into your next turn, you got 3 resources. You can use those 2 droids to reduce this guy by 4, so he only ends up costing you 2. So you could get this out in theory on the second turn, and then you've got a 4/5 Sentinel, and that'll stop like most of your opponent's attacks against you for like the next 2 turns, which feels pretty good. Multi-Troop Transport was my other preview cards that had to be in here. And then this one was like, okay, like you can exploit into it, and then when it attacks, it also makes more droids that lets you exploit other stuff. So I like that aspect of it, but the stats are just kind of awkward. And if you don't have the exploit stuff available, it's really expensive to pay 7 for a 3/6 that has to sit there for a whole turn before it can attack and start making droids. So again, I felt compelled to include this, but realistically, it's probably one of the weaker cards in the deck. And I'm just going to talk about the last of the ground units before I cycle back to space. So the deck is supposed to have 3 copies of Gore, but I only owned 1. So I put in 2 copies of Zillo Beast instead, just kind of figuring, hey, it's a big beefy thing that can kind of close out games. But without the exploit ability, Zillo Beast is like way more expensive than it looks on paper, especially compared to Gore, who you can get out for like 6 resources, really. But the Beast is like always going to cost 9 in this deck, and there's no true ramp, right? Like there's no resupply or anything. So if you've got Gore, this probably gets a lot better, and using the Beast as like a placeholder didn't really work out the way I wanted it to. Separatist Super Tank, however, is another huge body that can be exploited out very, very cheaply thanks to that Exploit 3. You cash in 3 droids, you get to knock 6 off of this, so you can play it for just 3 resources, and you've got an 8/8. That kills Vader, kills Snoke, kills a ton of stuff on the ground, although it doesn't have Overwhelm or Sentinel or Ambush or any sort of useful ability. It's just big, but sometimes that's all you need. And finally on the ground, we've got Battle Droid Legion, which, I get it. You're supposed to like exploit into this, and then when it dies, it leaves behind more little bodies that you can exploit again, but its own stats are just not really compelling. It feels a lot like another multi-troop transport where it's trying to do too many things, and so the trade-off is that you just get bad stats overall, which kind of puts us in an awkward spot. And I think if I was remaking the deck or retooling it, the Droid Legion would be another one of the cards that I would remove. So the real idea here is to set up on the ground with a bunch of cheap battle droids that you then use as exploit material to get out one of these huge capital spaceships, right? Providence Destroyer, Invisible Hand, or Malevolence. That's where the real power of this deck is. You're getting out like a 7/7 on turn 4 or 3, thanks to that huge discount that you get from the Exploit 4, right? If you've got 4 battle droids out there, that takes 8 off of the cost of this thing. You can play Malevolence for just 1 resource, which is insane. A 7/7 with Restore 2, like that's really hard for the opponent to catch back up to if it's only turn 4 or 5 or something. especially if they're not blue, if they don't have Fell the Dragon in hand, this can be very difficult for them to answer if you can get it out at that sweet spot in the curve. Now, the rest of the events and upgrades, I mean, we got a perilous position in here just to kind of randomly answer leaders or whatever, but we've also got things like reprocess, which the original deck included, and after playing with it, I think I would take this out and maybe replace it with something like Remnant Reserves or Recruit, something that would help me dig through the deck and find either a cheap body to use as exploit material or a payoff card, because this deck really struggles when your opening hand is all capital ships and you have no way to cheat them out. Or if it's later in the game and you're desperately looking for one of those capital ships or the super tank and all you're drawing is a wartime trade official, doesn't feel very good. Reprocess here, I get the idea behind it. It just makes more battle droids in theory. But because most of your stuff that dies are the droid tokens, it takes a while to get 4 defeated units in your own discard pile to get maximum value out of the reprocess. And even when you do, you just get 4 more droids, which doesn't ever really feel like a great payoff. So I would take reprocess out and replace it with, again, something that lets me kind of draw more cards or dig deeper to find the A or B half of the deck that I need, depending on what turn I'm on. Pyrrhic Assault is an interesting inclusion in here. I mean, it's double green and we're a green-blue deck, so we're not getting this out until, 5 resources or more. But that's fine because this is kind of like a game ender, right? If I've got a bunch of droids, maybe it's, 6 resource turn, we've deployed Nute and triggered the droid manufactory base and attack with Nute, and we get another droid token, and we're going really wide with the little guys. Then using the assault turns all of those into an extra 2 damage each, which can kind of help us wipe out the opponent's stuff. But it was really hard to get that to line up correctly. And this is another card I would probably replace with just more interaction with the opponent, right? I think other than this, we've got Fell the Dragon and the Invasion, and that's kind of it. So maybe just some takedowns or Power of the Dark Side or something might be a better use of this slot. And yeah, like I just said, we've got 2 copies of Fell the Dragon just to answer any big Star Destroyers or huge Jedi or something that have to go. And then Invasion. So in theory, this is the perfect deck for Invasion, right? Because it can be a one-sided board wipe. You wipe out everything that your opponent has, and all you got to do is give up 3 or 4 droid tokens for it, and you were fine letting those go anyway if it means you get to keep your capital ships or gore or whatever. But this card never helped me to win. It only ever helped me to not lose, but then I would just lose the next turn, right? The best turn I had with Invasion, my opponent was playing Heroic Boba Fett. They had their leader out. They had Boba Fett's armor on it. They had Plo Koon and Sundari Peacekeeper. So they had 3 units out, technically 4 cards with the armor. And my board was just a handful of droid tokens. And I was well, I cannot kill any of their stuff. So I slam Invasion, cash in my droids, blow up their board, including their leader, and I'm feeling pretty good, right? Maybe this will be the turning point. Well, they hadn't played anything yet, so they still had all their resources. So they play a Han Solo unit card and ambush into, I think I still had my own leader, Nute Gunray, and then they kill that, and now I'm well, shoot, I have no way to answer Han. They're just going to keep attacking with it and killing everything. I don't have any exploit material left to cheat out a capital ship. So I was dead in 2 more turns, and the Invasion didn't really help me the way I thought it would. So it's a neat card, and I like that in theory this is the perfect deck for it. But I think, again, just having more point answers, like another Fell the Dragon, Takedown, Power of the Dark Side, again, the traditional control pieces probably would be more useful than sandbagging the Invasion and hoping to catch your opponent overcommitting so you can wipe everything. They're going to see that coming, or they'll just be okay, claim, and then start their next turn playing, an 8 cost unit that you are still not going to have an answer for. Overall, I think this deck was pretty fun, and it was a unique challenge for me to play a villainous deck, especially because I had taken some time off for the holidays, and then I was out sick, so I hadn't played in like a month. So to show up at my local store and like see everyone again and be all excited and sit down and throw this on the table was a very unique experience, and I'm glad I challenged myself to kind of step out of the comfort zone and play with cards that I normally wouldn't use. That said, the deck definitely has some weaknesses and really struggles to hit the right mix of cheap exploit fodder and payoff cards. And then even once you get those payoff cards out, you're kind of at the mercy of your opponent because you put a lot of eggs into one basket. For example, my final opponent was a green Maul deck, and I'm thinking, okay, green and red, that can't usually answer like a big thing, right? Like they don't have Fell the Dragons. They don't have, ways to just kill things outright. They're going to have to fight through it for the most part. So I had turn 1, droid deployment, turn 2, Confederate courier, turn 3, I got to play Malevolence, right? I sacked the droids and the courier and took 6 off of that thing, and I got out Malevolence, and I'm thinking, great, now I've got a 7/7 in space, and my opponent had like, I don't know, Fifth Brother, or like one of the small force units. And I'm thinking, even if he hits me with like Force Throw or something right now, nothing's gonna kill my 7/7. Like this is great. I'm gonna start healing back up. I'm gonna put tremendous pressure on my opponent's base, and like I'm in really good shape, right? So I'm thinking, I got this game finally. Imagine my surprise when my opponent plays Force Lightning and uses all of their resources at the start of the next turn to do a full 8 damage to Malevolence. Knocks it right out of the sky, and now I am left with like literally nothing. I had used, my entire board. I did get to use Nute to like make a token on that turn because I'd blown up a bunch of my own stuff. But like now I have a 1/1 against Fifth Brother who's getting like, his Maul's about to deploy, and then the fallen lightsabers start showing up, and all the crazy things start stacking for my opponent. And it was too late for me. Like I'd put everything I had into Malevolence and expected that to carry me for the next 2 or 3 turns, and there was just no coming back. I was dead in like another turn or two. So even when this deck is doing the best it can and is getting out a huge capital ship way ahead of schedule, you're still not in a great position because that's usually all you have is the one ship. And if it goes down, you're not coming back from that. So yeah, I think this one's going to get shelved. It might be a cool starting point for like a Twin Suns if you line up Nute with another leader and just kind of use him to keep generating tokens and kind of be like a value add-on rather than the main focus of a deck. Then I think you can do some cool stuff like him with the Dooku leader, and then you can kind of use the droids to get the double exploits on the separatists, and then you could maybe ramp out some stuff and be a menace on your 4-player game, although then you're also putting a huge target on yourself, so maybe that's not a great idea. I don't play enough Twin Suns. But overall, I think the deck was sweet. I'm glad I got to give it a shot. It just wasn't for me, but maybe you feel different. Let me know in the comments. What cards do you like in here? What would you change? What would be your strategy to make Nute work? Or is he just something that only exists for like limited, right? Draft and sealed and pre-release. Maybe he's not meant to be a real competitive, premier level leader. I'd love to hear your thoughts. Leave them in the comments. Then make sure you like the video and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss the exciting adventures we only have here on Starcanum. I'll see ya.